Good afternoon. This is Simon Schwartz with the Colorado ASC Association, and we are today in Fort Collins doing a short with Schwartz with Barb Hardes, Casca's treasurer and longtime board member and supporter of the organization. Today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on a couple different matters, but before we get into that, similar to the other podcasts and other interviews and conversations we've had, a lot of folks in the industry have seen you, have talked with you when it comes to our conferences. I think it's important for people to get to know who you are and how you got to where you're going. And so I'd love to get a little bit of background about why healthcare was a focus for you and why healthcare not only is your profession, but it's a passion that you have in relation to growth and community and networking. So I'd love to get a little bit of history about you related to the healthcare industry and ASCs.
Good morning. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone, and good morning, everybody. Gosh, background, how did I get to where I am at today? I've been in the healthcare industry for about 37 years. Started off working in a pharmacy at the age of 16 out in the San Francisco Bay Area. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist because I was surrounded by pharmacists. And there was a lady who I worked with in the pharmacy who was going to college. She was in nursing school, and she would show up in the evenings after her clinical rotations, and she kept talking about how much fun she was having and how interesting it was. And at that point in time, I thought, maybe pharmacy isn't for me, and maybe I should look into nursing. So when I graduated from high school, I enrolled in the local junior college and started taking science courses and different courses that would either get me into pharmacy school or nursing school. And as I progressed through, I thought, nursing is really where I want to go. And so pursued nursing school. The college that I was at that time had a very good 2-year nursing program.
What about the nursing attracted you to healthcare? I mean, if at the beginning, obviously there was examples in front of you
Hmm.
which helped direct your way, but when
Hmm.
you came to kind of that fork in the road of either your classes are going to focus
Hmm.
towards nursing or
Right.
pharmacy, what
Hmm.
was the attraction? I mean, you mentioned a little bit that the mentor that you
Uh-huh.
had said how much fun it was, but in your experience, what was the direct
Mhm.
interest of what made nursing the decision?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I took a liking to biology, anatomy, physiology, and also while I was in high school at that time, I enrolled into a CNA course. They had a work program through the high school, and so you would start early in the morning, like from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. But it was like get students.
Throw you in the deep end.
Yeah, get students enrolled into programs, and they had a number of different programs. They had auto shop, they had wood shop, and then they also had CNA and a number of other programs. Through the CNA component of it, I didn't necessarily like CNA work, but I enjoyed working with the nurses and what they were doing. And we were in the nursing homes, doing a lot of that work. So I found that to be interesting. But then going through college, it was really the anatomy, the physiology, and then I loved being around people. I loved interacting with people, and working in the pharmacy at that time allowed me that opportunity to have interactions with people and work with the public. And so just kind of putting all of that together, I thought, okay, let's just give this a go. And so graduated from nursing school, got my 2-year degree. Shortly after that, moved out here to Colorado. This was early 90s, and the nursing field was pretty saturated at that time. So I had a really difficult time trying to get a job as a nurse. So I hit the pavement and started searching for jobs outside of nursing, with anywhere from like insurance coordinator to receptionist to anything I can get a job in the healthcare realm. And there was a foot and ankle clinic in town that hired me on as a medical assistant. And about 2 years into that, and with that organization, they decided they wanted to open up their own ambulatory surgery center, and they needed a nurse to help run that. And I knew absolutely nothing about it. And so this particular doctor sent me out to Utah. It was in the Zion area, and there was a podiatrist out there who had a single OR surgery center. So they sent me out there for a couple of days and said, go learn everything that you possibly can about their single room surgery center and bring everything back and let's build something.
Wow.
So,
That,
yes,
that
I was,
that's impressive.
yes, so I
The
was,
pathway is impressive, and we're
yeah,
not even at current day, but that is
no.
incredibly impressive.
Yeah, so I was in my mid 20s, so again, knew nothing and just started reading. Like he brought in big binders that were, 500, 1,000 pages long. He's like, here you go, start reading the regulations, start and let's meet, let's do this. And it was scary, but it was fun. I knew nothing about it, so
So that was your entry way into the
mhm,
ambulatory surgery community
yes.
by via one room OR ankle and foot clinic,
Hmm.
sent to Utah to meet
Hmm.
with folks that and let's be honest, we all know that the ASC industry, there's some dates that we can throw out, whether it's the
Hmm.
late 70s or the
Hmm.
early 80s. We're not talking about a time where surgery centers have been around for 20, 30, 40
No.
years. Outpatient had been, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
but this idea of physicians, and I'm using air quotes,
Yeah.
running their business, we'll get to that.
Uh-huh.
You got in kind of at the beginning of the, if you want to call it, the gold rush of the ASC
Hmm.
world.
Hmm.
How do you think that the interactions and the networks and the people that you met, you said you sat with these books reading, and obviously you started making connections both at probably Utah but
Hmm.
Colorado as well. How are some of those relationships? How did they help navigate your pathway at that point?
Yeah, I really did rely on the doctor because he was the one at the time making the connections and getting me connected with people. So there were a couple of people that he had connected me with. Of course, the doctor that was out in Utah, and there was another gentleman out of Seattle, and I don't remember his name. But he was also a consultant for the doctor. So the doctor and I, we would meet, the doctor who I was working for at the time, we would meet regularly and we would go through some of those motions of what do we need to do next and working with the architect on the build of the facility and looking at the different workflows
So
and
you were literally thrown in to the administrative and operations side
mhm,
and not the clinical side when the foot and ankle clinic decided to say we're going to open up an OR.
correct. Yeah.
So that's a
Hmm.
pretty big fork in the road when it
Yeah.
came to pathway,
Hmm.
where you had spent with pharmacy and nursing
Hmm.
interacting with people. You saw a transition in your professional life
Hmm.
where now you are interacting more
Hmm.
with the physician and more with the consultants
Hmm.
in the design and just learning, and we all know
Hmm.
in the surgery centers there's plenty of people with checklists and
Correct.
boards walking around making sure
Hmm.
that the door trim is painted correctly,
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
alone let alone what's
Absolutely.
going on in the
Yes.
OR. Very, very cool. So the
Yeah.
doctor helped make the connection.
Yep.
You come back from Utah, you're in Colorado. Are you in the Fort Collins area
Yes,
at
I'm
this
here
time?
in
So
Fort
we're up in
Collins.
the Fort
Hmm.
Collins
Yep.
area, and you're tasked with getting this one room OR for the
Hmm.
podiatrist open.
Correct.
All right.
So as we got closer towards survey and licensing, he did hire in a nurse who had experience administrative work and such. And so we brought her in, or he brought her in, and she helped get us all the way through. And through all of this time, I was also transitioning into pursuing a career at the hospital because I knew I was wanting to do a little bit more. And so this nurse and I, we worked together, and then she came in and brought up the tail end of that and did the actual survey. So it was a beautiful transition. And so back in '97, I transitioned over to the hospital and got a job on the orthopedic floor working the night shift.
This is the part that if I
Mhm.
had the ability to play music, it'd be like dun dun dun.
And
But I'm just kidding. We need
yeah,
hospitals. There's no
yeah,
doubt that is a joke. We definitely need our
yeah.
hospitals. So
Mhm.
you're working in the hospital,
Yes,
and you're working in the orthopedic.
yes. Yep. So about 2 years into that, I did see a job ad down in the operating room, and I loved the operating room when I was in nursing school. Saw an ad for orthopedic operating room educator, and I thought, oh, I know a lot about orthopedics. I would love to do this. Applied for it, and then realized that I had to have experience in the operating room, and in order to get into the operating room, I had to join what was called like the perioperative, I call it the boot camp
Yep.
of ORs. And so
AORN Perioperative 101.
yes, and they didn't have
Yeah, they didn't
ARN, the
have it then.
perioperative at that time.
Yeah.
So this was back in '01.
Okay.
And so I interviewed, there was about 20 people who interviewed for 5 slots, maybe a little bit more. And I was one of the lucky ones
Amazing.
to get in. So it wasn't just orthopedics, but once I was in the boot camp, it was a 2-year rigorous program. Learned every single service line and absolutely loved it. And at the end of the 2 years and having the experience that I needed, the position was still open. So I applied for it,
Some may call
got
that
the educator.
fate.
Yeah.
Some may
So,
call that
yep.
fate.
So got the educator position, continued on with that and really learned a lot about regulation and joint commission and magnet and just some of the,
Sanity
yeah.
of running an OR.
Yes.
Yeah.
And or in a healthcare facility for that matter, just a lot of collaboration across department lines. It takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, as I was learning and growing in that position, I realized I wanted a little bit more. And so I had attempted to move up the chain within the hospital a couple of times and realized I needed my bachelor's degree and potentially my master's degree. And so throughout the years, I did go back to school. I got my RN to BSN through UNC and then realized I also need to have my master's. So I did an online program through CSU Global and got my master's in management and healthcare administration. I thought, let's just broaden this out. Let's learn a little bit more. Let's make myself marketable. How do I move up the ladder and learn and grow and challenge myself a little bit more? So, after a couple of attempts for directorship at the hospital, those did not bode well. And in a couple of them, I knew that I was not qualified for, but I put myself in the position for that interview because I didn't know what I needed to know in order to move in that realm.
Makes sense.
Yep. So the interview experience was incredibly beneficial. Yeah, 2011, I was approached by OCR with their surgery center and said, we may have an opportunity for you. And I just started my master's program and I thought, oh my goodness, okay,
When it rains, it pours.
I'm in a full-time program. I had just finished up with a year-long interview process and quite frankly, I was a little exhausted and mentally drained.
Can't imagine why.
So after about 5 months of talking with my current employer, I decided to take the plunge and did that, and it's been a heck of an experience.
Yeah, so fast
Mhm.
forward us now,
Yeah.
it's 2024, we're at the beginning, mid of January.
Yeah.
How many facilities, just walk us through the pedigree of OCR at this
Yeah.
point, because what it started out as
Mhm.
was the facility we're sitting in, correct?
Correct, yes.
Which was one of the bigger orthopedic centers in the state because there was a number of physicians that were owners and engaged, and this was far before hospital partners, venture capitalists.
Correct.
This was when doctors owned. So it
Yeah.
was a big facility, but talk about where we're at right now.
Yeah, where we're at right now. So at the time when I came on in 2012, we had our Fort Collins location and our Loveland Clinic location. Fort Collins location had the ASC and the Recovery Center, which is the overnight facility.
Convalescent care.
Convalescent care,
that
correct.
need the definition who may not be in Colorado or in other states.
Yep. And so where we are right now, through the years, we have merged with another orthopedic practice down south. So we have locations in Fort Collins, Loveland, Greeley, Westminster, Lafayette, and Longmont.
So more than just the surgery center and facility.
Correct.
Because it's more than just a surgery center. We're sitting in a place with a rehab center.
Correct.
MRIs across the
Yep,
street.
we
You've
have
got your mini
therapy.
campus here.
Yep.
I'd love to kind of shift the conversation
Yep.
because the word hustle comes to mind when I'm hearing your story. What's the future of healthcare look like? Because if we're seeing, and I don't want to generalize generations of people, but we're seeing workforce shortages. We're seeing what older generations might call kind of an entitled approach of I want to work my hours at the rate that I want when I want, and no one can dictate anything otherwise. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the future of healthcare. And not only that, you bring up all these different people that were incredibly influential in your life. So where do you see healthcare going? But at the same time, what can we do to maybe avoid some of these really visible and apparent potholes, like these pitfalls that, if people aren't looking at networking, if they're not looking at how to engage community. We don't need a doom play. I think all of us can know what happens when people stop engaging, but what does the future of healthcare look like, and how do we find future leaders?
Mhm,
How do we find people like you? And I will follow up and also say, if I didn't say it beforehand, Barb, you're a treasurer for Casca,
mhm,
but you've been involved in the inner workings of what we're doing for so long now. We are consistently looking for new blood
mhm,
to bring into our board
mhm,
for ideas for all those things. So, what do you have to say about the future leaders of healthcare, not just
mhm,
for ASCs, but whatever entities come out in the
mhm.
future as well?
Gosh, that's a really good question. As I look back and you've asked some good questions about what were some pivotal points within your career. I think there's an internal drive that I have, but also in addition to that, the people that I was surrounded by were inspirational, and there was something about them where I look at these mentors and I think, wow, they are so smart, they are incredible. I don't know that I'll ever be as smart as them, or how can I influence somebody down the road? And so I think that we like to look at organic growth within our company, and we do see a lot of gems within the company. And so it's, how do we inspire? How do we mentor? How do we teach those within the company who have that drive or have that spark? And I think it's important for us to engage those folks and share everything that we possibly can. I've always been a firm believer in, don't hold knowledge close to your heart. Share it with everybody, because the more people know, the more it empowers people to want to do more, or not. But we would hope that that would be enough to inspire somebody to move up the ranks and chains.
I think of two things when you say that, especially when it comes to surgery centers and policy. One
Mhm,
is transparency. It
mhm,
sounds like you're incredibly transparent, not only with the physician lead teams,
mhm,
but it sounds like the transparency is part of the culture. And then the second thing that I hear about what the attraction is, both to the people that are the gems, but also to the people that have mentored you, is
mhm,
the word would be authenticity.
mhm,
Your ability to kind of sniff out that
mhm,
authenticity has led this path, but
mhm,
also the success of OCR
mhm,
and former clients that you had beforehand or
mhm.
who you're working beforehand
Right.
with. So I hear transparency, I hear authenticity, and I hear that really investing in your team is an important
Mhm.
thing as well.
Yep. And as you invest in your teams, the one thing I've learned over the years with some of our younger leaders who step into the role is, at times they may have a little trepidation on being vulnerable.
Talk a little
Because,
bit more about that.
yeah, with that vulnerability, what I've been a trend that I've been picking up on is that when they step in, they almost feel as if they have to know everything, and they don't.
And that's impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible. Stepping into a leadership role doesn't mean that you open the lid of your brain and you dump all the information in and you close it and you say, go. I think by being vulnerable means that you have to be okay that you're going to make mistakes, that there will be unintended errors, but just owning up to that and being transparent with your teams and saying, hey, you know what, I goofed this up. And I did a lot of that, and I still do. Within my first couple of years here, I was having to circle back with teams. I'm like, oh, I made a bad decision, you guys. I need to own this.
Well, the reality is in situations that you do everything correct, you're not learning anything.
Right. Or if you're
So
not uncomfortable, you're not stretching.
well, that's the lobster, right? The lobster
Yeah.
is essentially the
Mhm.
lobster grows out of its shell.
Yeah.
It gets to a point that it gets uncomfortable and then
Uh-huh.
has to leave that shell and grow a new shell
Yeah.
that fits itself. I love all of this stuff that you're saying. I think, when we're talking about future of healthcare, when we're talking about staffing and leadership and support, where are some of the places that you feel are good places to not only network but meet individuals like yourself.
Mhm.
I know in the past one of your first experiences was at OR Managers
Mhm.
Conference,
Mhm.
where you started getting your first in the mix
Mhm.
of the industry.
Mhm.
But would love to hear kind of where you feel you get the most value in the relationships that you developed, and where did you meet those
Mhm. Right.
people along?
Not to put in the plug for Casca, but I'm going to put in a plug for
Please, I love
Casca.
plugs for Casca.
There was, Casca, ASCA, AORN, associations have a huge network of people, and whichever conference you go to, there's always going to be one or two people that you can connect with, or that get their number, stick it into your back pocket. There's a variety of people who are experts in a variety of areas within the organization, and making those connections and having that give take of information is incredibly helpful.
And developing
and and
relationships.
developing those relationships. And every so often you just shoot them a note, hey, thinking about you, how's everything going, versus I prefer to not have people think that every time I reach out is because I need something. Likewise,
Speaking
if
of
they
which,
reach
please renew
out,
your membership.
yes,
Kidding,
please,
I'm just
yeah.
joking.
But truly, like the associations have been incredibly helpful, and you don't just meet colleagues, you meet friends, and these are lifelong friends,
Well,
lifelong colleagues.
and I also want to hit on real quick because it's a common theme among many of the conversations happening. You never know what relationship
Hmm.
can bring you, right?
Right.
So you may come to a Casca conference with the intention of meeting Barb and having these
Hmm.
conversations, and then all of a sudden you met somebody from the Colorado Department of Health
Hmm.
who you now have developed a relationship
Right.
with. And yes, it's incredibly helpful because you work at a surgery
Hmm.
center and you have this person's number, but you never know. Like I'll say to the high school you that was interested in pharmacy,
Hmm.
did you have any idea that at some point you would be sitting at the state capitol talking with representatives, talking with legislators, talking with rule makers, engaging with lobbying firms, lawyers, and I'm not even speaking on the OCR level. I'm talking from a nonprofit
Hmm.
level.
Hmm.
Did that even cross your mind when you were a late teenager, early 20s, just getting into this industry?
No,
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 right?
no.
So I'm going to come back to the idea of the future of healthcare
Hmm.
and future leaders. And I'd love
Yeah.
to just hear a little bit more. We're watching the physicians who started these businesses are now entering a time of their life where they're beginning to retire.
Hmm.
We're watching the same thing go for the nursing
Right.
community that started surgery centers. They're now at retirement age. We're seeing less anesthesiologists
Hmm.
available. We're seeing workforce. So talk to me a little bit about your perfect situation and what you see and how you see yourself playing a role in helping build the next generation of healthcare worker.
Wow. It's really smart. How do we get to people earlier in life versus waiting until they actually hit healthcare or when they're a nurse? How do we engage with some of the younger generations to get in? We have a number of folks within our company right now who are trying to get involved with the city leaders with getting into the junior highs and high schools and showing those individuals, what it's like to be in healthcare. How do we get them more exposed to ASCs or to nursing or, athletic trainers or whatever
Mhm.
whatever your company can offer? How do we get them in earlier? And then again, picking out those gems or the people who you feel have that special innate leadership ability. Get them inspired, get them engaged.
Show them that you're willing to
Right.
invest in them.
Yeah, what are their strengths and how do we use everybody's strengths to our ability? Because as you mentioned, we are in a workforce right now where we're struggling. People are now more, well, I should make a blanket statement, but when the workforce was heavily populated with the boomers, boomers came out of a generation of live to work. And as we're moving away from the boomers and different generations, it's migrating more towards a we work to live. People are looking for more work-life balance, but they're also looking for other things that I feel are important that they bring into the workplace. So just folks want to travel the world. They want to see different cultures. They want to see what else is out there. And I feel that that makes people well-rounded. They come back in and there's so much appreciation or even life knowledge and experiences that people bring into the workplace that make it interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because in a lot of other professions, you do have people that take sabbaticals,
Hmm.
and that whole purpose of the next 12 to 18 months, and
Hmm.
I will be back
Hmm.
guaranteed, but the next 12 to 18 months, I'm going to further enrich myself.
Hmm.
That's an interesting
Right,
approach, and it's very not American
right.
because the baby boom generation
Hmm.
has led to the you starting kindergarten, you go
Hmm.
all the way through college,
Hmm.
and the reality is a lot of places on Earth other than America, college is a real privilege,
Hmm.
and people get their knowledge from experience.
Hmm.
I think you're right. I mean, look, it's all perspective, it's all opinion, so it is what it is. But
Right.
the reality is in America, we spent quite a few years not focusing on trades.
Hmm.
And in healthcare, as much as education as it can
Hmm.
take from the top to the bottom, it's a trade. You know, I look at it as my plumber fixed the pipes in my house, and if I break my knee, the doctor fixes my knee so it works again.
Hmm.
So I don't mean to demean the amount of work and money it takes to become a doctor, but the
Right.
reality is encouraging high school students and even younger middle school students that if they have, I would speak to your experience, if they seem and they get that feeling of I like helping people at an earlier age, giving them the options, and I'm not plugging any school districts, but I will say I have a friend who works with the Emily Griffith School, and that's one of the things that they're trying to do is show in Denver some of the younger students in the
Hmm.
high school arena that there are more jobs than what they think.
Hmm.
And even in the sense of healthcare, like you may not realize, but in order for those lights to turn
Hmm.
on, there are hundreds and hundreds
Hmm.
of people
Right.
in this room, whether it's a school or a
Hmm.
healthcare facility, that make that happen. And I think you're right. I do think there's going to be an interesting, we're not, there's going to be, we've approached an
Hmm.
interesting area at this point, which is how do we find that balance? And especially in a post-COVID world,
Hmm.
it's balance in all arenas. It's balance
Right.
between virtual touch and in-person
Hmm.
touch. It's the balance between in-person conferences and
Hmm.
virtual
Hmm.
conferences. It's the balance of, look, people, what we're getting through right now, everyone's gotten this 3 to 4 week cold
Hmm.
that's lasted forever. So all of these things are impacting, but I do think at the end of the day, you know, as you said, engagement, transparency,
Hmm.
authenticity,
Hmm.
and really making sure, and I would say as a nonprofit person, we have the same mentality when it comes to finding those volunteers that want to be a
Hmm.
part of our leadership.
Hmm.
Because typically the people who sit on the board are not the people that say, "Oh, I'm too busy, I'm sorry." It's the
Hmm.
people who are like, "I'm really busy,
Hmm.
and I'm happy to sit on this board."
Right.
And those are the jumps we're
Mm.
talking about.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the time today. I want to give you the opportunity to bring up anything else related to future leaders in healthcare, surgery centers, engagement with Casca. You know, as I said, you've been a treasure, not just the treasurer for us, but you've been a treasure for us in the sense of helping lead the direction of this organization. OCR has played a pivotal role at the beginning of Casca, of getting us started, of looking at convalescent care. So you and your team have been instrumental in Casca's success over the last 15, 20 years, and we thank
Hmm.
you. But I want to offer up this time to close out in any way you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. As you were talking, I had all these other thoughts kind of like
We can do a
this,
follow-up
I
podcast
know,
too.
sparking up through my mind. So, back to how do we influence people into healthcare and what do we do for leaders? My husband recently has been telling me, he says, boy, he says, if I knew now what I knew then when he was younger, high school, college, he says, I had no idea there were so many other opportunities in this world. He says, I wish I would have had more exposure to different things to know what's out there.
My hand is up, and I'm making a preach
Yes.
type of movement because I 100% agree.
Yes, and so I think that's important as we tap into the younger generations. I don't know that these younger generations know what is out there in terms of healthcare because there is a vast menu
Yeah.
of careers to choose
I think about
from.
it, I hear
And
all the time radio, TV, dental hygienists
mhm,
become a dental hygienist. I don't hear
yeah.
become a nurse at a surgery center. You're right.
Right, right. Ultrasound technologists, radiology. I mean, there's so many fields out there
And that's a
that,
starting point.
yes,
That's a starting point
yep,
because anybody can then become that radiologist and then go back to school, get
right,
their degrees, get their masters, and then be running the show at a place like
right.
OCR
Yeah, there's so much out there. So really, it's like, how do we get people exposed to the menu of healthcare
and the
for
continually
leaders?
changing menu of healthcare.
Right, right. And then the second thing that came up as we were talking about the different generations is that we'll never be able to change a generation with how people think, but we need to embrace what people bring to the table because I think variety also helps with innovation. So embrace what people bring to the table, and then how do we influence and meld that into what kind of culture do we want to develop? And we have to adapt to change. But it's,
It's
it's that
difficult.
it's that give take.
Yep.
But again, just really focusing on people's strengths and how can we use everybody's strengths to our advantage.
Amazing. Well, Barb, thank you so much for your time today. I hope this wasn't too painful.
No, I
You have
was.
provided so much good information, and I want to encourage all of our listeners, if you're local in Colorado, please engage with our organization, engage with people like Barb when you come to our conferences and our events. Our leadership has so much knowledge behind them. Whether it's Barb or you've heard from Rebecca, there's other individuals like David Ornelas. Everyone has a unique pathway of where they've gotten and they've been successful in it. And part of the reason I wanted to do this is I think it's really important for people to hear these stories. A lot of people think about, they watch a documentary of a famous person and it seems almost unattainable. And the reality is everyone who's sitting in a leadership position at some point was at the bottom of the ladder, and they had to figure out what is the best way to get up that ladder. And in all the stories, as I've said and heard from you, there are key people in your life that help make that a clear pathway for you. And I just want to thank them and thank you for your time today, and look forward to more. So please, if you're out there and you're interested in hearing more from Barb, reach out, meet us at a conference, and if you need any orthopedic needs and you're in northern Colorado, reach out to OCR. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Really appreciate it. Everybody, have a great day.